Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our friends and colleagues joining us from around the world. And my name is Bo Tang, and I'm currently working at Hong Kong University's Science and Technology, and I'm also a research fellow of Luohan Academy. So on behalf of Luohan Academy, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. So part of our ongoing effort to explore the frontier issues at the intersection of technology, economics, and society. So we are honored to be joined today by Professor Lin William Tong, who will be presenting on the timely and increasingly important topic, a primer on Oracle economics. Professor Lin William Tong is the Root Family Endowed Chair, Professor of Management, and Professor of Finance at the Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University. He is the founding faculty director of Cornell's FinTech Initiative and the founder of the Digital Economy and Financial Technology Lab. His research spans the remarkable breadth, like from financial economics, AI, and applied theory, to digital assets, blockchain, and China's digital economy. Professor Tong also served as the editor or advisor to top journals like Management Science, Journal of Financial Intermediation, and Journal of Portfolio Management. So today's topic, a primer on Oracle economics, is based on a series of high impact papers and keynote talks delivered at institutions such as Boston Fed, the International Conference on Blockchain and AI, and others. So in this session, Professor Tong will take us through the emerging field of Oracle economics, how blockchain Oracle systems bridge decentralized networks with real-world data, and the trade-off they face across decentralization, scalability, and truthfulness, and the broader economic and security implication across, say, DeFi, gaming, supply chains, and more. With that, please join me in welcoming Professor Tong.
Well, thank you both for the kind introduction. It's a great honor to join our webinar series at Luohan Academy. I think I presented last year on a topic related to AI or generative AI for finance. And today we're going to shift gear a little bit to talk about Web3 economics. A topic that's related to blockchains, decentralized finance, so on and so forth. Now that is something that's not widely implemented or research about in mainland China, for example, due to the regulation. However, I think there is a lot of interesting economics, and that's an important topic, as Bo was trying to say. The CEO of Chainlink, which is the leading Oracle network company or platform or coordinator, whichever you want to call it, joined the White House Crypto Summit as one of the, I think, 22, 23 representatives earlier this year. And I would imagine, right, if we are talking about real world asset tokenization, if you're talking about having greater interoperability across digital platforms, China as a country probably wouldn't hire a US-based company to run the Oracle networks. So on many aspects, I think this is just as important a topic for scholars and researchers in Asia, in the Greater China area. So this is actually based on an overview article I have with a few of my students, former students, Guang Li, who's actually at HKUST Guangzhou, and Luofeng Zhou, who's a PhD student right now at NYU Stern, as well as Liam Fox, who's a full-time economics lead at Chainlink Labs. He was formerly an MBA student here at Cornell. So let me start with a disclaimer. I do serve as the senior economist and senior economic advisor at Chainlink Labs. I use some of the data from there, and the views expressed here would be, from my research rather than, representing any opinions or views from the company. When I say I use the data, I don't mean I take internal proprietary data from Chainlink. In fact, all the data observations are available in the public blockchain. That's the beauty of working on blockchain related topics. You can pretty much just download the data from the public chain. It takes some time, and it also takes some effort to organize them, but data are available in that sense. Here I'm starting the introduction with a quote from a Delphi maxim, admire oracles. And you've heard of Oracle company. Those are not what we are going to focus on today. We're not talking about Oracle, the company. We're talking about oracles as nodes in the digital network that would help you to communicate and transfer information and therefore value. But still, I think we should look into the functionalities and take it seriously, because it's very much related to peer prediction games. It's very much related to information economics. And right now, most of these studies are done by computer scientists. So as economists, the space is wide open for us to explore. So why do we need oracles? So if you've been following blockchain platforms or blockchain economic research, we do understand even for a so-called open blockchain, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's open at the level of that ecosystem. Anyone can join, but the network itself is still a closed system. For example, there is no natural link between Ethereum and Bitcoin network, right? And actually, that's not restricted to blockchain platforms. For any digital platforms, unless you introduce a bridge, it's hard to create, or at least by default, there is no interoperability. Digital networks are siloed. They are, ecosystems within themselves, but they don't naturally communicate unless you introduce a connection. Not only for digital platform. If you think about, say, Bo and I write a smart contract betting on tomorrow's weather, let's say on Ethereum. Yes, the smart contract is self-executing, there's some nice properties, but the tomorrow's weather, once realized, is not a native state of the system. And smart contracts can only be triggered or executed with some change or update in the internal states of the ecosystem of the digital network. So someone has to feed that piece of information from the real world, from off-chain to on-chain, from another blockchain to this particular blockchain. If I'm trading a derivative of Bitcoin, Bitcoin price has to be fed onto that DeFi protocol where I'm trading the derivative. Otherwise, there's no information update, right? So you can already see this is a very important issue. I mentioned real world tokenization, decentralized exchanges would need Oracle networks or Oracle nodes, the nodes that would bring information into the blockchain, right? And if you've watched Polymarket, they use a system called UMA for Oracle network. If you follow the election in the US, right, Polymarket was doing a fantastic job predicting how Trump is going to win. It's basically a decentralized version of prediction markets that's working very well. Why is it working well? Well, you can think of anything that you want to bet on or to express your opinion. Now you can, put real stake in that betting, right? Or let's say if you want to hedge against the tariffs that Trump is adding, you can start a Polymarket topic or bet where you say, I bet the tariff percentage is going to go up, right? You can use that as a hedge. If it indeed goes up, maybe as a manufacturer or exporter or importer, you suffer financially in the real business operation, but financially you can gain from Polymarket. But why can this be done in a centralized way? Well, number one, prediction market was stopped at some point. And I think one of the founders was literally has passed away. But the more issue is that it's centralized. So, someone starting a particular prediction or bet can run away with the money, right? But if you build this on a blockchain system, even if the person who started leaves, you can still keep the codes running. The protocol is there. Someone can replicate the code and build a new one, just like for Bitcoin. You can have a fork to generate Bitcoin Cash. If people still believe in the rule, in the protocol, the system can continue. And that's a very powerful information aggregation machine. And in fact, the Oracle industry has started to partner with traditional financial institutions such as Swift, Google Cloud, so on and so forth. And there are many interesting directions that the industry is moving into, right? For example, how do you introduce AI agents into the Oracle networks? Maybe they can automatically collect real-world information and reliably feed them onto the blockchain or onto certain digital platforms. How do we set up cross-chain standards so that things are more interoperable? Those are very interesting directions that the industry is heading to. Now, what I hope to do today, though, is to touch more on the economic research of oracles and oracle networks. So what I do is I'm going to introduce the blockchain oracle problem, which I pretty much have introduced just now, provide you some institutional details. All these are based on a series of studies, some published, some are still working paper by my co-authors and I. And I want to introduce a new concept called the oracle trilemma. I probably wouldn't have time to go into the proofs, but it's actually quite intuitive. You can see why the Oracle trilemma is even a harder issue to solve compared to blockchain trilemma, right? But we can make some progress. We can partially solve this trilemma using some additional mechanisms, such as staking alerting system, reputation system, basically dynamic incentives. And we can also try off-chain solutions or layer 2 solutions, meaning we are not going to try to solve it within the native blockchain, but we can add something to it. And of course, there are trade-offs, and I'll highlight that. I'll briefly review other technical vulnerabilities and economic manipulations that's happening within the system. And I'll show you how oracles or Oracle integration affects the operation of many digital platforms empirically, because we've been working on this for a few years. Okay, so institutional background, blockchain Oracle problem. Basically, blockchains are siloed system, so they don't naturally access external data. We need an Oracle to bring it in. And why is it called a Oracle problem? Well, I can designate some nodes, right, to be the Oracle. They can feed information, but there's no guarantee that the information fed is accurate. They can manipulate, they can run away, especially if we rely on centralized oracles, as traditional financial system does. So centralized oracles are there. They're still utilized. And in some cases, they can work very well. Let's say I'm thinking about the design of a smart city where you have supply chain or shipping logistics being managed by a database that requires information to be fed from off-chain to on-chain. You can rely on a local authority, a port authority or transportation authority, that's fine, to the extent that they are already trusted and they have sufficient incentives to behave properly. That's going to be effective. But in many other cases, we do need decentralized systems. Again, I'm not an advocate for decentralization just for the sake of decentralization. I think what's important is economic functionality. We want things to be functional. We want things to be, having certain properties, right? Like accurate, fair, inclusive, so on and so forth. If decentralized elements are helpful, that's great. I think what's likely to be optimal is a combination of centralized and decentralized elements. But at least we should look into this decentralized structure that the industry has proposed and has for which the industry has made great progress. Okay, so I'll mention a couple applications of oracles in a little bit. And here is basically repeating what I just said. Why? So centralized oracles could have problems. Decentralized oracles at least help us to mitigate single point of failure, right? Be it technical failure or economic failures. But introduce a decentralized network of oracles, or even semi-decentralized network of oracles, also bring in certain challenges, right? For example, they could still collude, or they might all move into a inefficient equilibrium due to the lack of coordination. It's harder to verify the information source when it's coming from decentralized nodes. There are all these issues, and there have been notable incidents. For example, the BZX Oracle exploit that happened a bit earlier. I think it was 2020, back in February 2020. What happens is, there was a BZX attack. The attackers identified a flaw in the price feed that BZX was using, and that allowed them to structure an attack where they, initially make a flash loan that's taken from decentralized exchange DYDX, and then they can send it to Compound and feed the information to BZX, so on and so forth. Through a whole chain of operations, they were able to, manipulate and attack the system, which incurred at least over 600,000 USD of losses onto the protocol within a very short period of time. And Pyth BTC price anomaly was an incident where Pyth, as a decentralized Oracle service provider, at one point misaggregated and misreported the BTC price. That leads to a huge turmoil in the trading of BTC derivatives, so on and so forth. Right? So there are these issues, even with decentralized Oracle networks. So we need to understand it better. Chainlink Labs is the dominant and leading DON provider. DON stands for Decentralized Oracle Networks. The long-term vision there is to be one of the players, right? One of the coordinators for Oracle networks. But the infrastructure is open. Anyone can come in and be a leader. At the moment, of course, things tend to be more centralized. And I think economists should contribute to help those systems to be designed, right, in a proper way, in a reliable way. And technically speaking, when you try to build a Oracle network, there are a few ways of doing it, and there are multiple layers that we have to consider, right? Where are the data coming from? Where do you put the API, so on and so forth? How do you validate? How do you aggregate once it's on chain? Who can see it? How do you transmit that, right, to, let's say, a connected network? There are many technical details, not the focus for my talk today, but they're quite interesting, especially if you work on interdisciplinary topics. And here is just a list of the applications, and there are actually many, right? Some are even related to sustainability, climate finance, right? If you want to write an insurance contract using smart contract, right? This is highly relevant. I already mentioned asset tokenization. Real estate properties, RealT, is a company that tokenizes cash flows from the rentals of real estate properties they own and package that into tokens. And they've been growing. I think even 4-5 years ago, I was using that as an example in my MBA class. And Back then it was just starting, but now it has reached a certain scale. So if you're interested, definitely those are um, very active directions in the industry. Now, let me introduce the Oracle trilemma. I don't think this has been introduced in the industry or in academic research yet. You probably all have heard of blockchain trilemma. It's hard to get scalability, decentralization, and security at the same time. The Oracle trilemma is even more more concerning. Why? Because for blockchain, information, every piece of information is online, right? For Bitcoin, you want to verify a transaction. The transaction information is online. So the verification is not very hard. But for Oracle networks, you're aggregating information outside the blockchain system. So you have to figure out whether the data is accurate, is reliable. And even when the data are authentic, how to aggregate them and report them matters, right? Do I take a simple average? Do I do some vinsorizing? What do I report to all the nodes within the network? Do I just report the aggregate statistics? Do I report the raw data? All these require a lot of mechanism design and information design considerations. And that's where I think economists' work is just as important, if not more, than the work by computer scientists in that regard. Okay, so the Oracle trilemma is basically the intuition that it's actually pretty hard, oh, even harder than the pure blockchain case to get decentralization, scalability, and here we care about truthfulness, right? The accuracy of the information aggregated and reported. It's actually pretty hard to get all of them at the same time. So in the overview article, which you can read in more detail if you're interested, we write down a basic model with the sketch of the proof. So basically, suppose there is ground truth, right, T, and there are N nodes reporting, they are observing noisy signals about the truth, and they are trying to decide what to report to the system. And the system has to figure out how to aggregate the reported values as well. So the aggregation is a general function of the reported numbers, the R hat. And the R hat is actually a noisy signal of the truth, right? And the truth typically is not non-verifiable, or is verifiable but non-contractable. Right? That's typically the challenge. For example, betting on tomorrow's weather, right? We do observe that. And I think in our hearts, we understand, oh, it's a sunny day, it's a rainy day. But when it comes to reporting, it's actually pretty hard. Now, the desirable properties for an Oracle network would be, it's scalable. When you increase the number of nodes, it's not increasingly too costly, right? That's how you get scalability for this uh, information aggregation steps. Um, I'm not saying that we definitely want decentralization, but to the extent that, we're talking about decentralized finance, so on and so forth, people would want to say, it's nice to have decentralization. So there's no central coordinator. You have to provide the right incentives for potentially anonymous nodes to behave in a way that's desirable. And truthfulness just means, truthful reporting or effective aggregation or both. And that's the unique outcome, right? If you have multiple equilibrium, in some cases it's truthful, in other cases it's not truthful. That's not ideal either. So the claim is no mechanism can simultaneously achieve all three. And here is just some intuition, right? Suppose I already have scalability and full decentralization. I want truthfulness. That's problematic. So we have full decentralization. Some nodes are anonymous. They are small. They would want to free ride on other people's aggregation if their information acquisition is costly, right? So that's already a challenge. If we don't have the full decentralization, we have a smaller group, they can they can easily collude and deviate from truthful reporting. But if we have scale, there's a lack of coordination among all the nodes. They might play a bad equilibrium, right? That's not useful. I'll come to Shumya's question in a little bit. So I just want to give you a quick example. Aggregation of the weather outcome, right? We're betting on that. So people care in many cases. The Oracle nodes are rewarded by how close their report is to the consensus report. And consensus report might be just the median of the report, of the average of the report. So if I believe everyone is going to misreport, right, on the weather, it's sunny day, but everyone reports it's raining. My best strategy is also to report rain, right? And the aggregated outcome is inaccurate. That's not good. And of course, I already mentioned small grouping, occluding group can shift the truthful report. Yes, Shumil has a question.
Hi. So, yeah, my question is about the potential conflict with. So I'm thinking about if there is a law of large numbers and the noises would be averaged out, and then the signal will be quite accurate. In that sense, is it possible to balance the accuracy and also the scale?
Yes, absolutely. So in the paper, we talk about that a bit more. You're absolutely right, right? Why do we want scalability? Why do we want to increase more nodes? Because we are hoping that the noise will be averaged out, right? Law of large number. But even in that direction, the challenge is, what if people just misreport? So in addition to the natural noise, there's the incentive issue of reporting, and that could also be an issue. There's a good equilibrium, right? If I know everyone is truthfully reporting, I want to truthfully report. But even in that case, if information acquisition is costly, again, people start to free ride, the signal quality goes down, right? And that leads us away from the truth, the ground truth. Yeah, but that's definitely an important consideration. Yeah, and feel free to pause me and ask questions. These are all very new topics or areas. We're just doing some initial exploration. Definitely, we should chat. And there are also other manipulations beyond the trilemma, which I'll mention a few, but probably wouldn't have time to go into detail, because they are a little bit more technically related, right? Like a Sybil attack, people creating multiple nodes, even though it's the same player, things like that. Computer scientists have thought a lot about that, how to, be resistant to such attacks from a technical perspective. I do think there are interesting economic designs along these lines as well. So that's another interesting direction, which we haven't explored much. Okay, so the version I presented to you or described to you, right, the trilemma, is a weak form in the sense that, we're saying achieving 3 is hard. There's a stronger form of the trilemma. In fact, achieving any 2 is pretty hard. Just think about it. If I want to have scalability and full decentralization, that's already pretty hard, because if I have scalability, that means people are, and decentralization, that means many people are feeding their information onto a blockchain. And we know blockchain capacity is limited, right? The mining costs energy and all that. So that's very hard if everything is on-chain, even just for this property, regardless, whether the aggregated information is accurate or not, just the operation itself is already extremely costly. So we do try to provide some partial solutions that would get around this stronger form of trilemma, where it says, achieving any 2 of the 3 is hard or impossible. We do show, if you add some mechanisms, at least achieving 2 out of 3 is feasible. I don't think we have a solution for achieving all 3 yet. So here is a partial solution. This is based on a study that we published in Management Science using data from Chainlink. So the Chainlink was aggregating price feed for certain derivative trading and all that. But in 2021, in the middle of 2021, they decided to run an experiment. Rather reporting and aggregating information on-chain, they run a parallel system where there's off-chain aggregation. There's a group that coordinates. They collect information, they do the aggregation before reporting on-chain, right? This is a pure mechanical cost reduction because reporting on-chain is costly. So that's where the yellow line is. And vertical axis is the concentration of the Oracle nodes, right? The log of the Herfindahl index. So, and the red line is the traded group. The blue line is the original aggregation mechanism. And what you see is basically the cost is dramatically reduced once you allow off-chain aggregation. And in equilibrium, the concentration of Oracle nodes also goes down. So that's helpful. You might think, off-chain leads to more manipulation, more concentration, but that's only thinking about the intensive margin. So the intensive margin didn't happen that way. But there's an extensive margin. When the cost goes down, more nodes wants to join as Oracle nodes. So you back to Shumil's remark, right? So you get more signals averaging out the noise. So that's helpful. Empirically, we show that there's a big jump. So that's one example. Another example is something I was helping designing at Chainlink. So the idea is, can we introduce some punishment or incentive provision for the nodes to report properly? So we start of a alert system. So anyone, when observing what's going on in the Oracle network, can report, oh, this aggregation is problematic. Oh, these nodes are manipulating. So you have to pay something. You have to stake some tokens to alert. And once an alert is raised, there is an adjudication committee, a small committee of reliable nodes or players. They are going to verify the ground truth. So here the assumption is that there is a ground truth that's verifiable, but it's very costly to verify. So the alerting system is really an off-equilibrium punishment to deter people in equilibrium from manipulating and misreporting. And in fact, that system is already implemented at Chainlink in some version. The third dimension, which is also quite interesting, is if you think about blockchain incentive designs, right? So far, it's almost uniformly static incentives. Per round of block building, how do we use proof of work or proof of stake, right, to make sure people behave properly? Moving on to the next block. It's a new game. It's a new round of tournament. There are benefits to that, right? No one is holding dynamic market power. But we are giving up dynamic incentives completely. In economics, in finance, we've done so much on rating system, reputation, dynamic incentive design, contract theory. We're giving up all that. Well, not us, but the computer scientists so far have given up on all that. To economists, it's all about trade-off, right? So I think there's a upside for including some centralized elements. And that's what I've been exploring with Luohan, basically introducing dynamic incentives back to blockchain design problems. And I didn't include I think the mass design, but the mass, but let me just describe an example. Think about crypto winter. During crypto winter, the tokens are worth less. And if you use the tokens as static incentives for the nodes to behave properly, let's say they report properly, they get token, they report closer to the consensus, they get more tokens. It's not a strong incentive because tokens are worth less, right? But if at the same time you maintain a reputation score of the nodes, even though the nodes are anonymous, their historical actions are visible, observable. So even anonymous nodes can carry a reputation based on the historical time series of actions. You can update them, right? If you behave well during crypto winter, we're going to upgrade your reputation a lot, right? So as the system, I'm not paying out more token and all that because they're not worth that much anyway. But that's very strong incentive because a Oracle node will know once crypto summer comes, because of their high reputation, they'll get assigned more jobs and tasks. The aggregation jobs, right? So that's bigger revenue, that's bigger fees. So they are incentivized to behave properly. So you can already see introducing some dynamic incentives can help mitigate the business cycle in the industry. And there are many other benefits, right? Like we know from dynamic contracting, backloading is a cost saving, right? We can introduce that to motivate the nodes, things like that. And you might say, okay, what if a node just they exploit the reputation and then they drop out and start a new wallet, right? We can't punish that person too much because it's anonymous. Well, that's true. But adding some dynamic incentive is already helpful because that person or that node is giving up the entire history that they've built up. And it's not cheap to build a good historical track record. So suppose they behave well for a while and they have high reputation and then manipulate the system. Yes, they get a one-time payoff, but then they have to rebuild the reputation when they start a new wallet or new address. So there's some trade-off, but I think it's helpful to introduce that. And that actually solves the problem of getting both the truthful reporting and the decentralization, right? Basically, to get around the trilemma, you just have to think about either dynamic design or some augmented alpha equilibrium punishment mechanism. Otherwise, we're stuck. Of course, if you use a hybrid architecture, there might be other things that we can do. Yes, Xinyu just got in. Okay, so all right. So those are economic Oracle trilemma. Once we combine all these with some technical aspects of Oracle networks, there are additional vulnerabilities of the system. Some are unintentional, right? Maybe API has a connection error, the node might fail, the network is too congested, right? These are things that computer scientists are actively working on. There is also intentional economic failures, such as we still face the issue of bribery, collusion, cyber attacks. And those are now quite nested in the trilemma that I described. I think there are additional trade-offs that one can study. Okay, going back to the PICE BTC mispricing issue, right? Well, we view that as a unintentional error, but what if that's coming from an intentional attack, right? That's possible. How do we prevent that? I don't think the practitioners have come up with a very good solution. What I observe in the industry is the industry it's very competitive. They want to move fast. They want to roll out a product next week. They rarely think about an optimal design as economists do. Maybe there's just not enough time, right? There's time constraint. But I think carefully thinking about optimal mechanism design or even information aggregation or information design is going to help the practitioners quite a bit. What are some of the design parameters? Well, you can think about staking, providing the right incentives. So staking is interesting, right? Staking is one way to introduce incentives. So you lock up your tokens so that you have a stake. If you don't behave properly, the tokens are going to be slashed. It's going to be taken away. So it's a punishment mechanism. Well, not only punishment, reward mechanism as well. Because if you behave properly, the staking is going to earn you handsome sum of staking rewards. This is interesting because this is not a standalone incentive scheme. Most of the staking rewards are coming from increasing the supply of tokens. So this is actually tied to the monetary design of the ecosystem, if the ecosystem has a native token. Again, that's where sort of corporate finance decision making meets asset pricing meets monetary economics. So that's also a potentially fruitful avenue for economists to explore. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into staking too much. we have several studies looking into the tokenomics of staking, so on and so forth. And to reduce token supply, you can also burn tokens, right? So it's very much related to how you change monetary supply within the ecosystem. But that monetary policy is a lot more closely tied to the fundamentals of the platform, because this is not the entire economy. This is a particular platform providing smart contracting function or other functionalities. It's a little bit easier to pin down what is fundamental about the system. Is it about the matching efficiency? Is it about the service satisfaction, so on and so forth? All right, so now let me move to the empirical side more. We've talked about conceptually how oracles could be useful for blockchain systems. Empirically, do they really serve these functionalities or purposes, right? Again, I'm not going to talk about the technical side too much. There are various ways to be integrated with the real economy or with other digital networks through oracles. You can do direct integration. You can, there are other layers. You can do a cross-chain bridge, so on and so forth. Very interesting designs, but I don't think is as economically interesting. It's more on the engineering side. But here is something that we find very interesting. This is based on study with my colleague here, Iswar Prasad, and my former student Daniel Rabiti, who's at US and now visiting HBS. So we just want to ask the question: when a network is integrated to the rest of the world through Oracle networks, what happens? We use an analogy to international economics that may or may not be appealing to economists, but we thought it was helpful for us to think this through. When a network is integrated with the rest of the world, it's very similar to a country being financially or informationally integrated with the rest of the world. WTO, right? Joining WTO is one example. And now, given the disruption that's happening right now, maybe that's similar to disintegrating away from the Oracle network for a digital platform. So what we find is that when a platform is integrated through Oracle networks, it led to, on average, a 75% in the growth of total value locked. That's an important metric for DeFi protocols. It's very similar to assets under management with traditional investment management industry. It has led to a 43% average market cap increase in the token value within a month. We tried to tease out some causality. We can't claim full causality, but that's what we observe. And you can use some syntactic control to produce the counterfactual, right? Without integration, how would the token price or total value locked evolve over time? That's the blue line here. And the yellow line is with the Oracle integration. We also find when two blockchain ecosystems are integrated, their outcomes tend to become more correlated. So there is, greater symbiotic gains across these networks. But that could raise a concern, right? Does that lead to increased systemic risk? And from international finance, we know it could go either way. We could have a diversification of risk once we are integrated with the world. We could also have, more correlated reactions to some shocks, even local shocks. What we find is, at least using two major crypto market crises, right? One is the Terra Luna collapse, the other one is FTX collapse. We find Oracle integrated networks exhibited more resilience compared to other networks. So the price drop for integrated networks is less. than other networks. Of course, these are just 2 events, and we have limited time series, so we can't fully claim there's no increase in systemic risk. But we do have a believable mechanism on why this is the case, right? Think about FTX collapse and all that. There's a loss in confidence in centralized exchanges. So people are moving to more decentralized systems. So decentralized Oracle integration would become more appealing. If I'm transferring my wealth from centralized exchanges, I need to be able to move it to other exchanges. Do I want to go through a centralized route or decentralized route? If I go through a decentralized route, I need to figure out a way to transfer value and the consensus records, right, from one network to the other network. All these would require Oracle integration. So, so from a flow perspective, right, the DOM integrated networks would have a advantage relative to non-DOM integrated networks. And that could be a plausible mechanism leading to the observations. That's pretty much what I have to present to you. I think due to time constraints, I can't go into some of the details. If you're interested, right, I definitely encourage you to read our papers and also related papers. For example, Rod Garrett has a beautiful short article on why it's impossible to get truthful aggregation in a simple coin tossing problem when the system is very decentralized. So it's a mainstream pure prediction game problem in economics. So if you come from an economics background, I think it's also very exciting topic to work on. David Parks, several PhD students, Dan Morose from Harvard, they are more from computer science side, but they are working on these economic problems. Going forward, of course, there are interesting directions to explore. How do you add encryption so that you can have multi-party computation from all the nodes, yet at the same time preserving the privacy, right, of the raw information. There's talk about how you integrate AI processors, and most importantly, how do we get around the Oracle trilemma? I think that's an open question. Governance issues is also quite interesting. And in terms of application, I'm particularly excited about the sustainability applications, right? ESG reporting, if you trade carbon credits on a blockchain-based ecosystem, you do need the information feed onto the blockchain. We have a study looking into environmental reporting and monitoring using blockchains in mainland China, even though tokens are not used, right? Blockchains and Oracle networks are still relevant. And we do see, when blockchain monitoring of the environmental reporting is introduced, pollution goes down in those cities. Of course, there's some reshuffling, right? The factories would be opened in other cities rather than the place where you have the blockchain monitoring. So in aggregate, it's hard to say what's the welfare impact, but that's where more investigation would be needed. So I'll stop here to see if there are questions from the audience, related to the studies I mentioned here, or Oracle networks, or Web3 economics in general. Happy to share what I've observed. Hope that's been helpful for research, be it in the industry or in academia.
Thank you,
I
Professor.
will.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I will. This is Long Chen.
Yes, yeah.
Long time no see.
Yes, yeah. Great to connect. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me firstly have a quick comment. I think it's great that I haven't listened to your talk for a while. So it's great for me to have the chance, and it really reminds me that recently with the death of Pat Bajari from Amazon. And I think I really appreciate that economist who gets into the mechanism design of technology. It's the applications. So I think we need more of those. And I'm so happy to see that you've been making progress, impact in this area. Given that, and it also, listening to what you're saying, it also reminds me that let's compare this Web3 stuff, the research, the application, let's compare this with the option literature. And I think there's a lot of quants, in the 70s, 80s, they got into the Wall Street. But I think a fundamental difference there and now is that in that area, I think they were meant to complement, to solve a problem that can be easily integrated into the current centralized institutions. While right now, the Web3 is more revolutionary in the sense that it wants to create a trustless world. And so that is the replacement of the current institution-dominated world. So I think that's why it's hitting some of the blocks. So I have three questions and a final comment. The first question, I think you are one of the person who can actually comment on the progress of the Web3 so far. As you kind of cautioned, you are not an advocate of the decentralized stuff per se, but you want to make sure this works. So I would like you to, after this several years of the research and your observation, what's besides the kind of this DeFi world, what's the real progress? You can tell us that there's very little progress and you don't see much. You can see there's a lot and it's coming, it's booming. So that's the first question. My second related question is that can you imagine another decentralized world, just like crypto stuff that is very useful, but somehow there's real demand in this world. And if there's such this decentralized world, what is it? Or it's the future, the boundary of it. It's really the integration of the decentralized and centralized world. My third question is how effective that you're talking about the trilemma of this Oracle stuff, which is quite interesting. I learned. I would like to see you comment on how effective this will be. Will this make the application explosive or a lot of growth? Because this looks like this decentralized world has to get into the centralized world, has the trustless and the trustworthy world has to have a connectivity. But will this improve much, or it's just very marginal? Now, those are three kind of related questions. And finally,
Yeah.
I have a comment. Let me just finish. I think, as you kind of informed us, that trustworthy data stuff, it's still central, and that's very much related to the current institutional arrangements. So that reminds me that I think ultimately the trustless world will most likely for a long time will be just a complementary play role to the current centralized world, not a replacement. The most beneficial area would be the finding a good cooperation between them. That seems to me what I learned, the biggest lesson I learned. But anyway, I stop here. I'm sorry for dragging.
No, this is great. the questions are great, and your comment sort of answers the question. I'm actually fully with you. I think so let me go through the responses to the questions, and I think you see what I mean when I say I fully align with you. Just quick report, right, on the progress of DeFi or decentralized systems. It's definitely way slower than what say Gen AI has been. So there's great uncertainty. It probably requires many iterations for the applications to take off. What are the most successful decentralized applications so far at the moment? I think stable coins has secured its place, especially in the multipolar world. That could be, it can keep growing. I think that's interesting, and it seems that governments and institutions are not fully against that. I think they are even more open to that than they are to central bank digital currencies in a way. And DEX, decentralized exchange, in terms of magnitude, they are not quite there yet to challenge centralized exchange, so on and so forth. But the mechanisms that they introduce are very interesting, right? The automated market making that leads to interesting study. And even some of that might be relevant for centralized exchange. Those are active space. Now, on the emerging applications, I think real world asset tokenization is a big deal. That's where Oracle networks will be very relevant, whether we use centralized or decentralized. That'll be very relevant. DePIN, right? Decentralized infrastructure building. All these are actually not so much on the decentralization aspect. I feel they are more on the digitization aspect. So that ties to your second question as well, right? Can we imagine a decentralized world, either the current Web3 base or some other form of decentralized world? I actually find it hard to imagine a world that's fully decentralized. And that's actually quite intuitive to economists, right? We know everything is about trade-off. There are pros and cons to decentralized system. There are pros and cons to centralized system. And the interior optimal solution is likely to be, a combination of both. This wouldn't appeal to the blockchain enthusiasts, right? The ideologists who just say, right, I want decentralization for the sake of decentralization because that represents full democracy, for example. I think there's always going to be a group like that. But whether the size of that group would overturn any market force, I'm doubtful. I think in the end, people are still driven by incentives. And in that sense, if centralized system is helpful, why not keeping some of the centralized elements? If it makes easier to introduce, DEX, introduce DeFi into our financial systems or major players, why not, right? So in that sense, I can imagine a more of a virtual economy that's thriving and growing with combinations of Web2 and Web3 elements. And maybe in the longer run, right, we do move to Web3 system, but I do think it's going to be a combination. And to your third question, how effective, right, would all this be with Oracle Network and all that? I think to the extent that we are thinking about a combination of the elements, I think it can actually be quite effective because we can pick the benefits of decentralized and centralized systems, right? What's the issue with centralized system? And we actually wrote in together in the book chapter, right? The single point of failure, the concentration of market power. I think those are very severe problems, especially nowadays. When I think about even Web2 digital platforms, there's a bifurcation, right? The platforms really have concentrated market power. Yes, they are behaving properly, right? Recently, JD.com has shown great public awareness by really wanting to take care of the delivery gig workers. But at the same time, just economically, there's no guarantee. Once one platform becomes a monopoly, in the longer run, they wouldn't squeeze the participants, right? On both sides or on multiple sides of a multi-sided platform. So I think the decentralized structure is one way to deal with that. Otherwise, we'll be constantly talking about antitrust issues, right? All that, breaking up a large platform, but that causes us to lose network effect, that causes us to lose sort of the power of aggregating data. So in that sense, I think if we go with the hybrid model, this can be very effective, because this is essentially about digitization. How do we turn assets more digital? How do we make it easier to transfer information and value? How do we make it easier to coordinate production, right? I think that's something you've been discussing for quite some time. You know, more concretely, right? The decentralized Oracle network could be helpful, especially if we believe in a Hayek type of setting where information is really localized. Even if we want centralized nodes for information aggregation, that's just really hard to do. And in that case, right, providing the right incentive for decentralized nodes makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I hope that speaks to your question.
Yeah, I think that's very good discussion for me. I think it's the direction is really to explore the inefficiency in both worlds and find mechanisms that combine the strengths.
Absolutely. And this is actually related to Web 2, right? If we think about the explosion of information, you talk about trust. Even in Web 2 with centralized entities, there's a trend of decentralization, right? For example, influencers. We no longer have trusted centralized information sources. We have an explosion of information sources. How do we authenticate the information? People prefer shorter videos, right? More sensational news and all that. But in terms of information production and aggregation in the society, that could be very problematic. Now, either we go down the Web3 route, right, to align the incentive better, or we have to introduce more regulation and authentication of information sources in Web2 systems, right? All the TikTok, Xiaohongshu, and all these platforms. If we just let it go without any restraint or constraint, I really don't know how much we can trust. Someone could be really entertaining, but just saying the wrong things, and people listen. I think as a society, that's problematic.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah.
It's my questions.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Cong. And I also have 2 questions.
Yes.
Although we are a little bit over time, do you still have like 5 or 10 minutes to discuss? If so, yeah. So you introduced like the Oracle trilemma as a fundamental challenge in Oracle network design. So among the trade-off between scalability, decentralization, and truthfulness, so which one do you believe is most critical to prioritize in the current stage of Oracle development, and why? Of course, not decentralization, right, as we mentioned just now. And also, like you also mentioned, like hybrid architectures are like increasingly being applied in real-world scenarios, such as like finance, supply chains, for example. For example, the collaboration. I know the collaboration between Swift and Chainlink, right? So, in your view, which key functions can be entrusted to centralized entities, and which components, like, do you think must remain decentralized? Yeah, this is my first question. And my second question is that because you also mentioned about like the AI powered oracles. So I was wondering, like say you mentioned like AI agent in Oracle, so like AI can help collect real world data to blockchain. So I wonder what are the key difficulties. So now at the intersection of AI and Oracle network, and also do you think do you like foresee any new forms of systemic risk or like ethical dilemmas emerging if we like AI and Oracle, like they are more intertwined? Yeah.
Yeah. But thanks for the questions, and these are also very, very important. I'll start with the second question first, right? So AI and Oracle networks. On the positive side, I think having an AI agent as a node to constantly monitor and report information is helpful, right? Because otherwise if I want to provide price fit for trading derivative, I have to keep working on this. I can automate my algorithm a little bit, but maybe not fully. So that's helpful. And also to increase the resilience and improve the design of decentralized systems. AI agents are very helpful because oftentimes we need to do stress tests. We need to simulate the system, right? Or if there's a big price drop in Bitcoin, what happens to the ecosystem, right? Is there a run and all that? Traditionally, it's a little bit hard to run agent-based simulation, but now if you can use AI-powered agent to run the simulation, it's feasible, right? So that's helpful. Generative AI is helpful. It generates actions. It can allow us to simulate the economy to understand it better. And that's not restricted to Oracle networks. I think it applies even to the traditional economy. The downside, at least for research, is if you have two buzzwords in one paper, AI and Web3, I think our profession being quite conservative is going to put us at a huge disadvantage. People are going to say, "Oh, you're just trying to work on the hot topics, right? You're just hyping on the topics." Sometimes it's a fair critique because well, whether it's hype or not, we need to read the paper. And there's a reason why certain topics are hype topics. They are attracting attentions because they are important or they are timely. So in that sense, I think writing papers, connecting the two is very challenging. Now in the industry, I actually think that's very much what people are already exploring. And over there is a little bit of over optimism because people do think about what's the next growth, right? If I'm a venture capitalist or entrepreneur. So sometimes people push that a little bit too much. And again, that's where I really think economic thinking and economists can come in and provide some rigorous analysis of what is truly innovative, what is technically possible, but not economically realistic, right? I think those are going to be very informative. Now, back to your first question about trilemma. I think we agree decentralization for the sake of decentralization is probably not the right way to go. Once we are willing to relax that a little bit, I think scalability is actually not too difficult because we know how to do that, right? With Visa and MasterCard, they scale a lot. So I think the more challenging and more important part to me for Oracle networks is still the truthful part, because it's really two additional challenges relative to a typical blockchain system, right? The offline information quality and the aggregation mechanism. Both are subject to design, and the current designs are very ad hoc. I think they have some intuition, and that's typically the case, right? Engineers have some good intuition. They just go with it. But there lacks a thorough cost-benefit economic analysis. There lacks a optimal design thinking in the space. And I think as Long was saying earlier, if economists can work together with the computer scientists to fill that missing piece, that would be really helpful. And to me, that's a great opportunity for economists, because for the truth is, for the internet, economists came in 20 years after the main evolution, right? Or revolution. We talk about clock auction, platform design, almost 20 years after, the whole wave of .com and all that. For Web3, for digital networks, I think it's a great time for economists. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
think, yeah,
I guess that
Lee
there's
has,
another question from audience.
yes.
Feel free to open your mic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Cong, thank you for your wonderful presentation. I just have one quick question about your observation on the maybe future cooperation between Web3 and the data dividend, because now we can see in China and Europe there are some data exchange platforms, like in Shenzhen they have Shenzhen data exchange platform, and I guess the data here it shares some perspective of the decentralization and the people now are really care about how to make data dividend in because like platforms gonna use users' digital privacy to make profit. And I just want to ask some your observations about like the development of the Web3 and the data dividend aspect.
Right. You know, that's a very relevant question. I have some detailed discussion in a working paper with Simon Meyer at CMU. Not so much on Web3, but on, you know, data DAO. We call it data DAO, data union. And it's very much related to what you are saying, right? For individuals contributing data, we typically don't have bargaining power, right? Like I just click on accept cookies because I need to use the web page. But in aggregated data generating a lot of profits and sometimes at my privacy cost. So how can we share the profit of that? How can we design that? And our argument is really, you know, GDPR, CCPA, data sharing, open banking, these are all partial solutions. They don't fully solve the problem. The one solution is actually to have something similar to a user union, something similar to a labor union, right? You can create a user union or data union. You need some coordinator to bargain collectively with the larger firms collecting your data to ensure privacy. Now, there are two ways to do this, right? One way is to do it through the governments. It's actually a good solution. If the government has a benevolent designer can effectively run this data bureau and help share some profits with the data contributors and also monitoring the privacy preservation. That's very helpful. And that's probably the route I think that's more feasible in mainland China. The bureaus are already built. I think the design and the valuation of data, all those needs actually contributions from economists to figure out. Another route is to go with a more decentralized design, that is data DAO. So if you build a protocol, somehow coordinating data contributors and use, privacy preserving encryption, commitment schemes, zero knowledge proofs, things like that. You can potentially use tokens to compensate the contribution of data. Suppose I contribute my data, conditional on, there's privacy preservation, I collect some tokens. And if in the end, collectively, the data generate profits that split between a large platform and the data contributors, the benefits can be used to buy back tokens and burn them, and that leads to token appreciation. That's one way to go, right? If you want to go down the Web3 route. Of course, you can also introduce some dividend design, whether centralized or decentralized. Whatever profits is collected, it's going to be distributed to the data contributors. One caveat is that we shouldn't distribute all benefits to the contributors. So in that sense, GDPR, CCPA may not be the most effective because we should recognize that platforms also play an important role in generating the data. Maybe not personal data like birth date and all that, but the interaction data requires the platform creating the scenarios for people to interact. And the platform has to invest in that. So open banking is counterproductive because, well, if I know whatever information and data I generate is going to be shared freely with a new entrant, I have less incentive to build my infrastructure. So we have to balance that to split the profits among the various parties involved in generating the data. So that's sort of three potential directions where this could go, and one of them is definitely very closely related to Web3. But in general, this is about digitization and the data economy.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for Professor Cong? No. Okay, thank you, Professor Cong, for that insightful and comprehensive presentation. So you've given us a lot to think about, especially in like how oracles act as the connective tissue between blockchain networks and the real economy. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the future events. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for having me joining the webinar. Good to
Thank
see
you very much,
everyone.
Professor Cong.
Good chat.